The blast of the Winchester echoed across the frozen valley, sending ravens scattering into the slate-gray sky. Jedediah, Jed Hawkins, lowered his rifle, smoke still curling from its barrel. Two bodies lay sprawled in the snow before his cabin. The third man, wounded but alive, scrambled onto his horse, terror etched across his face. Jed raised his rifle again, the wounded man's back centered in his iron sights. His finger tensed on the trigger. Then he lowered the weapon. The rider disappeared into the tree line, leaving only a trail of blood-speckled snow. Jed knew he'd just made a choice that would haunt him. In these mountains, mercy rarely went unpunished. "I left a world of men who worship the gun law," he muttered, tasting gunpowder on the wind. But sometimes a man's past follows him like a shadow. Winter had come early to Silver Pass, Colorado in 1882. Jed Hawkins, 38 years old with a face weathered by wind and war, worked methodically, splitting firewood behind his cabin. His movements were precise, economical, a man who'd learned that wasted motion could mean death. The cabin stood defiant against the mountainside, hand-built 6 years earlier, when Jed had walked away from the army and decided the company of mountain goats was preferable to men. He'd served as a military translator, Apache, Spanish, Comanche, used when officers wanted borders, not bloodshed. But he'd seen bloodshed anyway. Too much of it. He'd witnessed young women gunned down during raids, children stuffed into wagons, old men left half buried in their own blankets. And when he'd spoken against it, nobody listened. So he left. His Winchester 73 leaned against the splitting stump, never more than an arm's reach away. The Colt Navy revolver remained holstered at his hip, its ivory grip worn smooth. Not decorations, tools as essential as his axe or hunting knife. Inside the cabin, a kettle heated on the iron stove. A haunch of venison hung ready to be sliced for the evening meal. Jed had sealed the windows with oilcloth and stacked cords of firewood along the north wall. The nearest town lay 12 miles downhill through rock and snow. His closest neighbor had died last spring. Jed preferred it that way. The sound came just after sunset, not the wind, too steady for that. Footsteps, several sets, light and cautious. Human. He moved silently around the side of the cabin, hand near his revolver, but not drawing yet. The snow had stopped falling, and the moon cast blue shadows across the clearing. As he cleared the porch and stepped past the split rail fence, he saw them. 5 women. They stood at the edge of the clearing where scrub oak met snow. No horses, no wagon, just feet wrapped in rags, red from cold. They wore dresses that might have once been leather or cotton, now patched, torn, and crusted with frost. Blankets hung from their shoulders, barely covering what remained of dignity. One of them, the one in front, took a step forward. Despite the cold, her movements carried confidence. A curved blade hung at her side. In the moonlight, Jed could see her dark eyes assessing him, the cabin, the woods beyond. "We need a place," she said, voice steady despite her cracked lips. "One night. We ask no more." Jed didn't move. Behind her, the youngest girl swayed slightly, her legs stained dark with what could only be blood. An older woman with hawk-like eyes held her rifle with practiced familiarity, watching the tree line. "Apache?" Jed asked in their tongue. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Yes, you speak our language. I was a translator. Army. Then you should know why we run." Jed studied them closer. Their stance, their watchfulness, the way they carried themselves. Proud, half wild, not broken, but worn out. "Who's hunting you?" he asked. "Calhoun Bradley." The name hit Jed like a physical blow. Memories flashed. Fort Laramie, screams in the night, orders he'd refused to translate. Bradley had been a lieutenant then, known for his Apache management techniques. Bradley runs a prisoner camp near Fort Garland, the woman continued. Or he did. He burned our shelter, said we were hiding warriors. Were you? Her gaze hardened. Our men died months ago, but that doesn't matter to Bradley. He wants our land. Jed looked past them into the darkening forest. No torches, no riders. Not yet. How many men with him? 7, maybe 8. All killers. She gestured to the youngest girl. Clara needs shelter. She won't survive another night outside. Jed considered the last time he'd welcomed a stranger, 3 years back, a trapper who'd stolen his mare and left him tied in the barn for 2 days. But these weren't trappers. These were survivors. He opened the gate without a word. They entered one by one, watching him as they passed. He caught the scent of blood and pine needles on their clothes. The hawk-eyed woman nodded once as she entered, her rifle still ready. Inside, Jed added wood to the stove and fetched 6 tin bowls from the shelf. The venison would have to stretch further tonight. I'm Sierra, said the woman who had spoken. That's Amara, the hawk-eyed woman with the rifle. Layla, a woman with a leather pouch who immediately began examining Clara's leg. Nina, the quietest one, assessing the cabin structure with practiced eyes. And Clara, the wounded girl, no more than 17. Jed didn't offer his name. They didn't ask for it. After they ate, he unrolled spare bedrolls from his storage chest. The floor was hard but warmer than the forest. He set a blanket beside Sierra, who looked up at him with calculating eyes. We'll be gone at first light, she said. Jed walked to the window with his rifle across his lap. Snow's coming. Tracks at the ridge tell me Bradley's men aren't far behind you. Sierra exchanged glances with Amara. Then we've brought trouble to your door, Amara said, her voice low and graveled with age. We can leave now. You'll die before you reach Carson's Fork, Jed replied. First light is soon enough. That night, Jed didn't sleep. He watched the door, listened to the crack of the fire, and tried not to think about the responsibility that now sat in his chest, heavy as the snow on the roof. Dawn broke with heavy snowfall that erased yesterday's tracks. Jed had spent the hours before light-checking his perimeter, noting the positions of trees, rocks, and the slight depression where the land fell away to the north. Old habits from campaigns he'd rather forget. Inside, the women were already awake. Layla knelt beside Clara, replacing a blood-soaked bandage. Sierra stood at the window, scanning the forest edge. Nina had found Jed's tools and was repairing a loose floorboard without being asked. Your leg will slow us down, Jed said to Clara as he entered, shaking snow from his coat. I can ride, she answered, voice strained but determined. If you have horses. 2 horses. Won't be enough, he replied, and the pass won't be clear for at least 3 days. He turned to Sierra. Bradley's men left tracks along the ridgeline. 7 sets. They're circling. Sierra's face hardened. Then we've trapped you in your own home. Jed moved to a wooden chest in the corner. He unlocked it, revealing several revolvers, boxes of ammunition, and a shotgun. If they come, we're better off inside than running. You'd fight for strangers? Amara asked, suspicion heavy in her voice. I'm fighting against Bradley, Jed answered. Been avoiding that fight too long. For the first time, Sierra's expression softened slightly. Not a smile, but something close to respect. Then you should know what you're fighting for. She gestured to Layla. Show him. Layla carefully unwrapped Clara's leg. The wound wasn't just a bullet hole. It bore the distinctive pattern of a branding iron, property of Fort Garland. Bradley doesn't run a prisoner camp, Sierra explained, her voice flat. He runs a labor camp, for mining. Our husbands died in his silver mine, and when we complained, he decided we were inciting rebellion. Jed's jaw tightened. And the government allows this? The government sent him, Amara said bitterly. They call it reservation management. Jed began distributing weapons. Nina, take the shotgun. Short range, widespread. Amara, you know rifles. Take the window facing east. You're not going to ask if we can shoot, Sierra asked, checking the chambers of the revolver he'd handed her. I've seen Apache women fight, Jed replied. I've never doubted what you can do. They came just after noon, two riders approaching openly from the South Trail. Not Bradley's full force, scouts. Jed recognized the pattern, assessed defenses, test response, report back. He'd used the same tactics in the Apache campaigns. Get back from the windows, he ordered quietly. Let them come close. The women moved silently into position. Sierra beside the door, Amar at the rear window, Nina with the shotgun covering the main room. Layla and Clara hid in the root cellar beneath the floorboards. Jed stepped onto the porch, rifle cradled in his arms but not raised. Snowfall had lightened, and the air held that strange stillness that comes between winter storms. That's far enough, he called when the riders were 30 yards out. The men stopped. Both wore heavy coats, scarves across their faces. One had a rifle across his saddle, the other a holstered revolver. Looking for travelers, the first one called. Seen any Apache women pass through? Haven't seen anyone in weeks, Jed replied. Pass is closed north of here. The riders exchanged glances. The second man's hand drifted toward his revolver. Mind if we warm up inside? Been tracking since dawn. I mind, Jed answered. The first rider squinted. You military? Something familiar about you. Was. A long time ago. Name? Hawkins. Recognition flashed across the first rider's face. Hawkins, from Fort Laramie. The translator who... The shot came from the cabin window, Amara's rifle. The first rider fell backward off his horse, dead before he hit the snow. The second man drew his revolver, but Jed was faster. His Winchester barked twice, and the man tumbled sideways into the snow, clutching his chest. Sierra was beside him instantly, rifle ready. There will be more. Jed nodded. We need to move the bodies. Hide the horses. The wounded man gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. Bradley has 30 men, not just 7. Government, contract. Sierra aimed her rifle at the dying man's head. Wait, Jed said. What contract? Gold mine, Apache land, millions, in the hills. The man's eyes glazed. He'll burn. Everything. His final breath fogged once in the cold air, then nothing. 30 men, Sierra said as they dragged the bodies behind the woodshed. We can't fight 30 men. We won't have to, Jed replied. Bradley won't risk 30 men in a frontal assault on a defended position. He'll send 10, maybe 12. And that's better? Jed surveyed the land around the cabin. In the right position, 1 rifleman can hold off 5 attackers. We have 2 rifles and high ground. Sierra studied him. You've done this before? Apache campaigns. I was on the wrong side then. Inside, they gathered around the rough wooden table. A storm had begun again, heavy snow reducing visibility to mere yards. A temporary ally. Bradley will wait for the storm to clear, Jed explained. Gives us time. He outlined his plan. Booby-trap the approaches, create firing positions, establish fallback points. The women listened intently, adding suggestions based on their knowledge of Bradley's tactics. The man fears fire, Layla noted. Lost an eye to a burning branch in a raid years back. Jed nodded. We'll use that. Nina, who had barely spoken until now, laid out several metal implements on the table. I can create makeshift explosives with your mining powder. Small charges to trigger when they approach. Jed raised an eyebrow. You're a smith? My father was, she replied. I learned. The storm raged for 2 days. They used the time well, fortifying the cabin, setting traps, drilling on signals and movements. Jed was impressed by their adaptability and grit. These women had already survived hell. They wouldn't break easily. On the evening of the second day, Clara's fever finally broke. Layla had treated the wound with a mixture of herbs and what little medicine Jed had on hand. "She'll need real doctoring eventually," Layla told him quietly. "But she'll live." Jed nodded. "When this is over, I'll take her to Dr. Fenton in Canyon Post. He's discreet." "You assume we'll win," Sierra said, appearing beside them. "I assume we'll survive," Jed corrected. "Not the same thing." Later, as the others slept, Sierra found Jed at the window, scanning the moonlit snow through a gap in the shutters. The storm had passed, leaving a landscape transformed, pristine, beautiful, and deadly in its exposure. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. "The truth." Jed was silent for a long moment. "I was at Mountain Springs, 1876. Sierra's breath caught. Mountain Springs had been a massacre. 60 Apache men, women, and children killed after surrendering to Army forces. "I didn't fire a shot," Jed continued, "but I translated the surrender terms. I told them they would be safe." His knuckles whitened around his rifle. "Bradley was there. He led the second wave after the chiefs had been separated from their people. And you did nothing. I tried to stop it, was arrested, court-martialed for insubordination." His voice was hollow. "By the time they released me, it was done. So I left, came here, thought I could outrun what I'd been part of." Sierra didn't offer absolution or condemnation. She simply nodded. "Tomorrow, you get another chance." They came at dawn. 15 riders emerged from the tree line, spread in a semicircle around the cabin. They maintained distance just out of effective rifle range. At their center, a tall figure with an eye patch sat upon a black horse. Calhoun Bradley. "That's close enough, Bradley," Jed called from behind a reinforced window shutter. Bradley's laugh carried across the snow. "Hawkins, I thought that might be you. Still protecting savages, I see. These women are under my protection, legal residents of my property. Those women are fugitives from a government reservation. Dangerous insurgents." Bradley's voice hardened. "Hand them over and you walk away clean." Jed didn't respond immediately. He glanced at Sierra, positioned at the adjacent window. She met his gaze, unwavering. "Here's my answer, Bradley." Jed fired a single shot, striking the snow directly before Bradley's horse. The animal reared, nearly unseating him. Bradley's face contorted with rage. "Burn it down! Kill them all!" The attack came from multiple directions. 3 men rushed the north side where Nina had laid her traps. The explosion sent 2 flying backward, the third scrambling away, clothes ablaze. Gunfire erupted from the tree line, covering fire as 4 more attackers approached from the east. Amara's rifle cracked methodically, dropping 1 man, winging another. Jed focused on the western approach, where Bradley directed 3 riders in a flanking maneuver. His Winchester found 1, then another. The third reached the cabin wall, pressing against it for cover. Sierra dispatched him with a single shot when he peered around the corner. For 20 minutes, the battle raged. The cabin walls, reinforced with stone and extra timber, absorbed most bullets. Smoke filled the air, gunpowder in the smoldering front porch. Struck by a flaming arrow. "They're pulling back," Amara called. Jed assessed their situation. 2 windows shattered, the front door splintered but holding, 1 wall scorched. Inside, Nina nursed a graze to her shoulder. The others were unharmed. Outside, 7 of Bradley's men lay motionless in the snow. The rest had retreated to the tree line. "They'll regroup," Jed warned. This was just the first wave. Bradley's voice carried across the battlefield once more. "I've got something that might interest you, Hawkins." A figure was pushed forward from the trees, a man in a lawman's coat, hands bound, face bloody. "Sheriff Donovan here was coming to check on you," Bradley called. "Found him on the trail. He's mighty interested in why you're harboring Apache fugitives. Aren't you, Sheriff?" The bound man nodded frantically. Sierra tensed. Is he really a sheriff? Jed studied the distant figure. Wolf Hollow doesn't have a sheriff. That's a deputy's coat, and it doesn't fit him. One of Bradley's men, Sierra concluded. Jed nodded. A trap. Bradley continued, I'm sending the sheriff to speak with you, Hawkins. As a courtesy. The supposed lawman began walking toward the cabin, stumbling in the deep snow. It's a diversion, Jed said quietly. Watch the flanks. Sierra nodded, moving to cover the eastern approach. Amara kept her rifle trained on the tree line. When the sheriff was 20 yards from the cabin, Jed called out, That's far enough. State your business. Got papers here, the man replied, holding up a leather folio. Warrant for the arrest of 5 Apache women escaped from legal custody. Throw the papers, then back away. The man tossed the folio into the snow, but instead of retreating, he lunged for a revolver hidden in his boot. Jed's Winchester cracked. The man fell face first into the snow, dead. Simultaneously, movement erupted from both flanks. Bradley's real attack. 6 men rushed from the east using a fallen log as rolling cover. From the west, Bradley himself led 3 riders in a charge. Nina! East side! Jed shouted, swinging his rifle toward Bradley. The cabin erupted in gunfire. Nina's shotgun blasted repeatedly, its roar punctuated by the sharper cracks of revolvers and rifles. A bullet struck Jed's shoulder, spinning him against the wall. He recovered, firing one-handed. 2 riders fell. Bradley and the 3rd veered off, circling toward the rear of the cabin. Sierra appeared at Jed's side, pressing a cloth to his wound. Can you shoot? He nodded grimly, reloading with practiced efficiency despite the pain. Outside, the attackers had reached the cabin walls. The sound of breaking glass came from the rear. They were trying to force entry. A scream tore through the chaos. Clara's voice from the root cellar. They're underneath, Layla shouted. Jed and Sierra rushed to the trap door. As they reached it, it burst open. A bearded attacker thrust his revolver upward. Sierra fired twice, dropping him back into the cellar. More gunfire erupted from below. Layla appeared, dragging a bleeding Clara toward the main room. 2 more down there, she gasped. Jed pulled a stick of dynamite from his coat, one of Nina's creations. He lit it, counted 2 seconds, and dropped it through the trap door, slamming it shut afterward. The explosion shook the cabin foundation. Outside, Bradley's voice rose above the din. The cabin's surrounded, Hawkins. No way out. Smoke was now pouring in through multiple broken windows. They had minutes before the fire took hold. Amara appeared from the rear room, bleeding heavily from her side. Bradley, back door, she managed before collapsing. Sierra rushed to her side, but Amara pushed her away. Go, take the others. She pressed her rifle into Sierra's hands. I'll cover the rear. Amara, no! I'm already dead, the older woman said firmly. Let me choose how. Sierra embraced her briefly, then turned to Jed. Front door, now. Jed nodded. Nina, Layla, get Clara ready to move. As they prepared, Jed knelt beside Amara. Save the last bullet, he said quietly, pressing extra cartridges into her hand. She nodded, understanding perfectly. They took my husband at Mountain Spring, she said. Perhaps you were there. I was. Then we both get redemption today. They burst from the front door into chaos, smoke, gunfire, shouting. Nina led with the shotgun, clearing a path toward the trees. Layla supported Clara, while Sierra and Jed provided covering fire from behind. The remaining attackers, disoriented by the sudden breakout, fired wildly. Jed took a second bullet to his thigh, but remained upright, limping determinedly. From the rear of the burning cabin came the steady crack of Amara's rifle, followed by shouts of pain. She was keeping her promise. They had almost reached the tree line when Bradley appeared. cutting off their escape. His face was a mask of hatred, his remaining eye wild. "You cost me 15 men, Hawkins," he shouted over the wind, "and millions in gold." "The gold was never yours, Bradley," Jed replied, his rifle trained on the man's chest. "Just like the land was never yours." Bradley sneered. "The land belongs to those who can hold it, the strong, not savages or traitors." Sierra stepped forward, Amara's rifle steady in her hands. "Then let's see who's stronger." Bradley drew his revolver with surprising speed. His first shot caught Jed in the chest, staggering him backward. His second went wide as Sierra fired. Bradley clutched his stomach, blood spreading across his coat. He fired again, grazing Sierra's arm. She didn't flinch, advancing steadily. Jed, down on one knee, raised his Winchester with trembling hands. He and Sierra fired simultaneously. Bradley fell, his body twitching once before lying still in the blood-stained snow. Behind them, the cabin collapsed in a shower of sparks and flame. A final shot echoed from the ruins. Amara's last bullet. 3 weeks later, Jed stood before the magistrate's office in Canyon Post. His arm rested in a sling, his leg still bandaged beneath his trousers. Beside him stood Sierra, Nina, Layla, and Clara, all dressed in clean, proper clothing purchased with Bradley's gold pocket watch. The magistrate, a thin, severe man named Hollister, reviewed the documents before him. "These papers claim these women are legal residents on your property, Mr. Hawkins. Yet they're clearly Apache, reservation Apache. They're employed as my household staff and ranch hands," Jed replied evenly, "as is my right as a landowner." "And the matter of the 15 dead men on your property?" "Self-defense, Your Honor. They attacked my home and threatened my household. Sheriff Morgan's report confirms Bradley had no legal authority." Hollister frowned. "Bradley had powerful friends. Bradley had government contracts to mine gold on Apache land," Sierra interjected. "Illegal contracts. We have proof." She placed a journal on the desk, Bradley's own records recovered from his saddlebag. Hollister examined it, his expression darkening. "This implicates officials in Denver." "Yes, it does," Jed agreed. "Officials who might prefer this matter simply resolved quietly." Hollister considered this, then nodded slowly. "Very well. The women's residency papers are approved. The matter of Bradley and his men is closed, ruled self-defense against unlawful aggression." Outside in the crisp winter sunlight, Sierra turned to Jed. "It's done then?" "It's done," he confirmed. "You're legally protected, free to stay or go as you choose." The women exchanged glances. Clara, her leg healing but still limping slightly, spoke first. "I have nowhere to go." "Nor I," added Nina. Layla nodded her agreement. Sierra looked at Jed. "And you? Are you still running from ghosts?" Jed gazed toward the mountains, where his ruined cabin lay. Already in his mind, he was rebuilding it, larger, stronger, with room for 5. "Not running anymore," he said quietly. "For the first time in years, I've found something worth standing my ground for." Sierra's hand found his, their fingers intertwining briefly. "Then we stay," she said. "All of us." As they mounted their horses for the ride back to Silver Pass, Jed felt the weight he'd carried since Mountain Springs began to lift. Not absolution, nothing so simple, but purpose, a chance to build rather than destroy. "Sometimes," he said as they rode toward home, "a man has to fight to find his real reason for living." Sierra glanced at him, then at her hand resting lightly on her stomach, a secret not yet shared. "And sometime," she replied, "that reason finds him." Behind them, Canyon Post dwindled into the distance. Ahead, the mountains rose against the sky, harsh and beautiful and unforgiving. But this time, Jed Hawkins wouldn't face them alone.